What would you do if the love of your life who once abandoned you without a word suddenly walked into the restaurant where you're now working and saw you pregnant, struggling to carry trays? Would you turn away, or would fate finally give you the closure you never had? This isn't just a story about a broken heart. It's a story about a billionaire forced to confront the deepest regret of his life, and a woman who had every reason to hate him but carried something far more powerful than resentment. What happens when their worlds collide again years later under the harsh light of truth? Stay with us to discover the twist that no one saw coming and the ending that just might restore your faith in second chances and real love. This story will stay in your heart long after it ends. Ready to feel something real? Let's begin. The black SUV pulled up to the curb outside the Marlowe Room, the most exclusive restaurant in Chicago. Every square inch of the place radiated luxury, from the Murano glass chandeliers to the imported marble floors. Inside, the city's elite clinked wine glasses and whispered over foie gras, oblivious to the storm that was about to break at table 12. Graham Walker stepped out of the vehicle, adjusted his cufflinks, and glanced at his platinum watch. Billionaire, CEO of Walker Global Enterprises. Ruthless deal closer. The kind of man whose name made boardrooms go silent and whose smile was more weapon than charm. Tonight was a celebration. He had just finalized a deal that gave him control of the largest luxury hotel chain across North America. And tonight he wasn't alone. He had invited Savannah Blake, a 28-year-old model with legs for days and an Instagram following bigger than some news outlets. She wasn't complicated. She liked his money, his cars, his presence. He liked that she didn't ask questions. The maitre d' practically bowed as Graham entered. "Chonaruna, Walker, your table is waiting." He nodded curtly. "She'll be here in a few minutes. Make sure everything's perfect, as always." He was escorted to the private section near the windows, where the skyline glittered like it was built just for him. For a man who had everything, this was routine, predictable, controlled. Then the wine arrived. She came carrying a bottle of Chateau Margaux, 1998. The kind of wine only a man like Graham would casually order without blinking at the price. She wore the restaurant's uniform white blouse, long black skirt, and a black apron. But none of that mattered, because the moment Graham looked up, the world slammed to a halt. Lena Mitchell, his ex-wife. 3 years. That's how long it had been since he'd seen her. Since she had screamed through tears, "You'll never see me again," and signed the divorce papers with trembling hands. He hadn't flinched back then, just smiled and told his lawyer to wire her a check. Now she stood in front of him, her hands visibly shaking as she held the wine bottle. Her hair, once styled to perfection in elite salons, was pulled into a simple ponytail. Her skin was pale. Her eyes, those eyes that used to light up when they looked at him, now looked past him, cold, almost hollow. But what struck him like a punch to the gut was her belly. Lena was pregnant, visibly, undeniably pregnant. At least 7 months, he guessed. Her blouse could no longer hide the fullness of her stomach. Her entire posture was different, slower, like she carried the weight of more than just a child. "Would you like me to open the bottle, sir?" She asked, her voice too calm to be real, cracking just slightly at the edge. Graham couldn't speak. His phone, gold-plated, custom-made, slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor. A few nearby guests turned to look, but he didn't care. What was she doing here? Why was she pregnant? And why the hell was she working as a waitress? Memories flooded back like a violent tide. Lena dancing in their penthouse kitchen on Sunday mornings, laughing in the back seat of his car on road trips, crying the night she begged him to start a family. And him, he had looked her in the eye and said, "A baby is a liability, and I don't do liabilities." Now here she was carrying someone else's child, working here of all places. He wanted to say her name, wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but his throat was frozen, his thoughts tangled. Then from the entrance, a familiar voice pierced the fog. "Graham, sorry I'm late. Traffic was murder, Savannah." She entered like she owned the place, heels clicking, red lips curled into a bright smile. Her designer dress hugged her like a second skin. Her diamonds sparkled under the crystal lights. She was everything Lena had once been in a newer, shinier package. Lena glanced at Savannah and something shifted in her face, something that hurt Graham more than he was ready to admit. She nodded slightly and whispered, "I'll send another server." She turned to leave, but Graham's hand shot out before he could stop himself. He gently grabbed her wrist. "Lena, wait." She froze. The look she gave him was sharp enough to cut through steel. Then Savannah reached the table. "Is everything okay?" she asked, confused by the sight of her date, holding the arm of a very pregnant waitress. Lena's mask snapped back into place. Professional, cold. "Everything's fine. Enjoy your evening." And just like that, she disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Graham with a full glass of wine he couldn't drink and a mind that refused to calm down. Savannah giggled and opened the menu. Graham didn't hear a word she said. All he could see was Lena, and all he could feel was a storm coming. Graham couldn't think straight. Savannah sat across from him, laughing at something she saw on her phone, sipping her $400 glass of wine like this was just another Friday night. But Graham's eyes never left the double doors leading to the kitchen. He could still see Lena's trembling hands, her belly, her eyes. It wasn't guilt. No, this was deeper, colder, a slow, paralyzing panic, the kind he'd never felt in billion-dollar negotiations, boardroom brawls, or hostile takeovers. This was personal, raw, and it shook him to his core. "I'll be right back," he said suddenly, cutting Savannah off mid-sentence. She blinked. "What? Where are you going, business?" He lied, already rising. He walked fast, ignoring the maitre d's confused expression as he made a sharp turn past the restrooms and slipped through a side door labeled "Staff Only." Beyond it, the hum of conversation disappeared, replaced by the clatter of pans, sizzling burners, and sharp voices calling out orders. Heat, grease, chaos. And then he saw her. Lena hunched over by the sink, one hand on her lower back, the other bracing against the stainless steel countertop. She looked pale, drained. A glass of water trembled in her hand as she closed her eyes and took a long breath. Something broke inside him. Without thinking, Graham pushed through the kitchen doors. "Sir, you can't be in here," shouted one of the line cooks, alarmed. A supervisor stepped forward, wiping his hands on his apron. "Sir, this is a restricted area. You need to leave now." But Graham didn't move. His eyes were locked on Lena. She opened hers slowly and froze. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice thin, angry. "We need to talk." "Not here," she snapped, eyes flicking nervously to the staff, now openly staring. "You're going to get me fired." He stepped forward. "Then let's go somewhere else." She didn't answer at first. But when another cook whispered something and laughed, her jaw clenched. Without another word, she turned and led him through a back hallway to the emergency exit. The alley outside smelled like cigarette smoke and cold rain. Trash bins lined the wall, and the buzz of neon signs from the other side of the building was the only light. Lena leaned against the brick, hand on her belly, visibly exhausted. "I don't have time for this, Graham." He stepped closer. "What happened to you?" Lena looked up slowly, her eyes dark with hurt. "You happened," she said bitterly. 3 years ago, you tossed me out of our life like I was just inconvenient, like wanting a child made me defective." He swallowed hard. "I didn't know you were pregnant." "I wasn't," she replied, jaw tightening. "Not until months later. And it's not your baby if that's what you're thinking." The words sliced through him like glass. Not his. "You moved on?" he asked, voice hoarse. "Yes," she said, but her voice cracked just slightly. "I tried." He could feel the unspoken weight behind that word. Tried. "Where is he?" Graham asked. "The father? Gone." Silence settled between them like snow. Thick, quiet, devastating. Graham looked down. "Did he leave you when he found out?" "No," Lena said, voice steady now. "He left when I found out he had a wife. 2 kids. A whole secret life." Graham flinched. Lena laughed dryly. "Yeah, looks like I have a real talent for choosing men who disappear." "Lena," he stepped forward again, but she raised a hand. "Don't," she said softly. "Don't pretend like you didn't break me first." The air felt heavy, like the night was holding its breath. "I never stopped thinking about you," he said. She scoffed. "You didn't even call. I thought I was doing you a favor," he muttered. "Letting you go. You wanted things I didn't. I thought I was setting you free." "No," she said fiercely. "You were setting yourself free from responsibility, from emotion, from being human." That stopped him cold. Lena took a shaky breath. Do you know what it's like to carry a child while cleaning houses during the day and serving rich strangers at night just to afford prenatal vitamins and rent on a one-bedroom apartment with a leaky ceiling? He shook his head. Of course you don't, she whispered. Graham's voice broke. Let me help. Help? Her laugh was sharp. With what, my medical bills, diapers? Or maybe you'll buy me a condo and feel like a hero. I don't want to be a hero, he said. I just want to be there. For you. For the baby. She stared at him. You're not his father, I know. And you left me. I did. So why now? Because I saw you in that restaurant, he said, his voice trembling, and for the first time in 3 years, I remembered what it felt like to feel. I didn't even know I was numb until I saw you again. And when I saw your hands shaking, I realized, I don't care whose baby it is. I care that you're alone. I care that you're tired. And I care that I wasn't there. Lena's lip quivered. She turned her face away. I don't need saving, Graham, she whispered. I know you don't, he replied gently. But maybe, just maybe, you'd let me stand beside you this time. Not in front, not behind, just next to you. A long pause, then she looked at him, eyes wet but burning with strength. You want a second chance? He nodded. Then earn it. He smiled. I will. She pushed away from the wall, her back straightening. I have 2 hours left on my shift, she said, opening the door. I'll wait. Suit yourself. And with that, she disappeared inside, leaving Graham in the alley, the cold biting into his skin, but his heart finally warming. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the interruption, but we hope you will help us improve our content in the future. If this story touched something inside, you drop a like, hit like, and tell us your country in the comments. The next few days passed like slow-moving thunderclouds. Graham found himself constantly checking his phone, replaying the words Lena had said to him in the alley. You want a second chance? Then earn it. He had no idea where to begin. For a man who'd spent his life commanding rooms, closing deals, and never hearing the word no, the silence from Lena was humbling. But he didn't retreat. He refused to. On the 5th day, he sent a message. I don't want to buy anything. I just want to carry the groceries. No reply. The next day, I called 3 clinics to find out which prenatal vitamins are best, just in case you want to switch. Still no reply. But on the 7th day, just before midnight, he got one line. My next appointment is Monday at 9, Northbridge Community Hospital. That was all the invitation he needed. He didn't bring flowers. He didn't wear a suit. He arrived in jeans and a hoodie, holding a coffee and a banana muffin, both of which Lena refused at first but didn't throw away. She didn't say much during the appointment, but she didn't ask him to leave either. That was progress, at least to him. Over the next few weeks, Graham became a quiet shadow in her life. He didn't push. He showed up. When she needed someone to drive her to her night shift, he was there. When her sink started leaking, he fixed it himself instead of sending a contractor. When her back ached, he didn't suggest a massage spa. He bought a second-hand recliner chair, carried it up the narrow stairwell himself, and left it in her apartment without a word. And slowly, Lena's walls began to soften. She let him stay for dinner once. Nothing fancy, just canned soup and crackers, but Graham said it was the best meal of his life. They talked. Not about the past, not about betrayal or guilt, but about her childhood, his regrets, and what scared them most. For him, it was losing the one thing he'd never admitted he truly needed. For her, it was believing in someone again, only to be let down. One rainy afternoon, Lena let him touch her belly. Say hi, she said quietly. Graham placed his hand gently across the curve of her stomach. For a moment, nothing. Then a kick, a strong one. Whoa, he whispered, his eyes wide. That's his favorite spot. Lena smiled. He likes to remind me who's boss. I like him already, Graham whispered. That night he couldn't sleep. He lay awake in his penthouse, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Lena, asleep in her tiny apartment across town alone. He realized that every luxury around him, every inch of polished glass, every sleek designer chair felt meaningless. He didn't want square footage. He wanted a hallway with baby socks on the floor, a fridge covered in preschool drawings, a small kitchen filled with the smell of burnt toast and morning cuddles. He wanted them. And when the baby came early, 2 weeks ahead of schedule, Lena called him. Not a friend, not a cab. He drove like a man possessed, barely remembering red lights or potholes. When he arrived at the hospital, she was already in a wheelchair, breathing hard. "Thanks for coming," she said between contractions. He didn't say a word, just took her hand. 6 hours later, Lena gave birth to a healthy, pink-cheeked baby boy. The nurse turned to Graham. "Would you like to cut the cord?" He looked at Lena for permission. She nodded, and in that moment, scissors in his trembling hands, tears streaming down his cheeks, he became a father. Not by biology, but by choice. They named the baby Caleb Walker. At the birth certificate office, Graham waited outside as Lena filled out the forms. When she returned, she handed him the papers. The father's name read, Graham Walker. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice raw. She nodded. "You earned it." Weeks passed. Diapers, feedings. Midnight walks around the block with Caleb bundled against his chest. Graham gave up control of his company, handing daily operations to a trusted executive team. He didn't want conference calls. He wanted storybooks and lullabies. They moved out of the cramped apartment and into a modest 2-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood. Not flashy, not overwhelming, just real. Lena returned to teaching art part-time at a local school. Graham took Caleb to daycare when she worked mornings and learned to make grilled cheese sandwiches without burning them. The penthouse was sold, the yacht gone, the fancy car collection reduced to one practical SUV and a used minivan. But for the first time, Graham smiled with his whole face. One evening, Lena found him asleep on the couch. Caleb snuggled on his chest, both of them snoring softly. She sat beside them and ran a hand through his hair. When he stirred, she whispered, "Thank you for not giving up." He smiled drowsily. "You were always worth the fight. Even when I wanted to scream at you, especially then." They laughed quietly together, the baby dreaming between them. Later that night, as Graham stood by the nursery door watching Caleb sleep, he felt something unfamiliar: peace. This wasn't the life he had planned. It was infinitely better. Because love isn't about perfection, it's about presence, about showing up when it matters, about fighting to stay when leaving would be easier. And in the quiet hum of that tiny nursery, Graham knew he hadn't just built a new life. He'd found home. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the interruption, but we hope you will help us improve our content in the future. How about you? Did this story touch your heart? If you felt something reading this, comment under below, hit like, and tell us which country are you watching from. And don't forget to share this story with someone who believes in second chances.